Why do you seem so scared? All I wanted to do was play with you.
Welcome to Trax, hosted by best-selling horror author Jack Pierce. We publish new episodes every Monday at 2 a.m. EST. Go to terrortrax.com/shop if you would like to support the show, and follow us on social media at terrortrax.com/follow. Enjoy the show.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Halloween Review-a-thon. In this podcast, I will be reviewing every single Halloween movie in order, starting with the very first one from 1978. It was directed by John Carpenter and is known as one of the best horror movies of all time. And honestly, I don't want to say it's overrated, because it's not. And it may be because I've seen this thing so many times, even though I came to this one with a fresh mind, because I haven't watched it in a couple of years. But this movie is painfully slow, and I get what they were going for, and it worked great if you're someone that's never seen this movie before, or you're new to horror movies, like you haven't been spoiled by Jason and the later Halloween movies, or Chucky and other ones like that. This one is pretty much a 90-minute film with about 25 minutes worth watching. The first hour alone is almost all talking about nothing, with Michael just watching in the background here and there with creepy little music cues, and that's it. You know, that's scary to some extent, and I feel like maybe the version that I watched was a bit botched, because a lot of times those movies from the 70s, they'll redo all the gunshot sounds and add different little music pieces here or there, rearrange all this stuff, and just make the sound design a lot different. Because the sound design in the version I just watched, which was the Blu-ray version, was pretty atrocious. Like, every single time Michael would show up, there was like this little annoying sting that just completely took me out of it. It was like the ding. It would happen so often. And I know I've watched this movie before and it didn't do that. So that was annoying. And if it wasn't for the sequels, like if this was a standalone movie where there was no Halloween 2 and you showed it to me now, I'd honestly give it a 6. Because here's the thing, all of the iconic stuff is at the end of the movie. There are maybe a few minutes here or there outside of the last 30 minutes of the movie that anybody will remember from this. You know, Loomis doing the speech about the blackest eyes and all of that. That happened about 45 minutes in. But it's just such a slow, plodding bore for the most of the film. And it's kind of sad. I'm not saying that every movie needs to be Friday the 13th, because Friday the 13th didn't come out until after this, a couple years after this movie. And this movie is the one that inspired all of the movies going forward. And everyone does their part fine. There's no real bad acting in this. But it's just, maybe I've seen it too much. It's like the Back in Black of horror movies. Yeah, sure, it was great when it first came out, but do you really want to listen to Back in Black again on your own? You know, it's an important movie. And it does have some great cinematography. It's probably the best atmosphere in the entire series, because it really does make you feel like you're in the Halloween season. But from a plot standpoint, it's completely bare. There's nothing really going on. You know, the kills are very tame, and there's very few of them. And I don't really recommend watching it unless you're trying to just get context for watching Halloween 2 from 1981, which is my favorite horror movie of all time, because they took what was great about Halloween and amplified it, and also, you know, sped it up and had a lot more atmosphere and a lot less filler, which made it, you know, much better. I really think that Halloween, the movie, the original, is a 30-minute scary story with an hour worth of filler. And for its time, it's great, and I still think it's a great film. It's shot very well, it's acted very well, it has a great story, it has, you know, decent enough kills, even though they're very, very tame, probably because back then it wasn't as gory, unless you were in like this exploitation movies. But I really can't recommend this if you want like a standalone movie. 6 out of 10. Let's move on to Halloween 2. All right, so I just finished watching Halloween 2 from 1981, my quote-unquote favorite horror movie of all time. I haven't seen it in years, but I've always name-checked this one as the best horror movie ever. And I still love this movie. Compared to the first one, it is incredible. Probably the best Halloween movie, easily. But it swayed just a little bit for me because of a few issues that the movie had that I never really noticed until I really watched it with a critical eye. The first thing is the hospital setting kind of takes away a lot of the fear because it's kind of unrealistic that there's a hospital where all the lights are off and there's barely any staff and all of that. And also, it's such an unfamiliar setting for me, at least, and I've been to hospitals like a million times, that while hospitals already are kind of creepy, it just didn't feel like a real place to me in some of the scenes. And the biggest thing that bugged me about this, and this is something that other people bring up, which I disagree with actually, this part, so we'll do a little part A, part B real quick. There are other horror reviewers out there that will say stuff like, oh, this is just a Friday the 13th ripoff, or, you know, they ruined the series with this one because it's a generic slasher villain now, and I don't believe that at all. I think that Halloween needed to evolve into something better than the original movie. Because the original movie, it's slow, it's boring, and the last 30 minutes has everything that you've ever seen in any clips. There's really no reason to watch the first hour of Halloween. But Halloween 2 rectifies that by kind of starting in the middle. So that's why I've always felt if you took Halloween 1 and 2 and combined them into one movie, it would make a lot more sense for why Halloween 1 is so slow and why so few people get killed in it. But I love this movie, and the other thing that bugs me about it is not that the fact that Michael uses a lot of different weapons, sort of like Jason would, have a different weapon per kill and everything, never stuck with something. It's not that at all. It's just the jump scares. They overuse them so much. And I want to amend my Halloween 1 review just a little bit because I complained about the music and the sound design. And every time Michael would show up, you'd hear a little ding-ding, little like sting that was really annoying. That was because I was watching a more modern version where they did different things with the sound design and soundtrack. When you watch the original, a lot of that isn't there. I don't know why they keep doing that. There are movies like The Terminator that has it too, where they decided to replace all the gunshot sounds, where now they sound a lot more sterile and digital and don't sound like real gunshots. And I don't understand why they do that. It makes no sense. I mean, it was good before. The reason it's a classic is because of how it was made before. The only thing that should be changed from an original film is to upscale it or maybe put out a, more HD version. Because I believe they say that the film that they used, even all the way back in the 40s, if you had a resolution to it, it was like 4K, 8K maybe. But they just had like the limitations of the time, and, technology could bring this forward to make them a lot more, upscaled in HD and all of that. But that's the only thing that should ever be done to a movie. And that's what ruined the first movie for me, was all of that needless stings and, cues that, oh, here's Michael, we need to add a little funny noise. But Halloween 2 actually did that a little bit too much. And I feel like if they would have cut those parts out where they would have the stings and the jump scares and all of that, this really would probably be the best horror movie ever. Which I'm not saying it's bad at all. I think that this is in my top 10 horror movies, probably number 2, but it did get grating after a while. Plot-wise, it's perfect, and I never understood why people thought it was a problem that Michael and Laurie were brother and sister. I know that it took away, the mystique of it, but the later movies added too much to it anyway that was just in the wrong direction if you think about it. Like the Thorn trilogy, that entire thing was stupid. Even though I love those movies, and we'll get to them later in this episode, because I'm recording this as I watch them. I watch them, I review, all of that, instead of just doing it all in one take. That way we can actually not have them jumbled up where I'm trying to just remember stuff from each movie. But as I watch these movies again, Halloween Kills, Halloween 1, Halloween 2, for some reason, I'm really starting to hate H2O in my memory. And I wouldn't even put Rob Zombie up, but I'm really starting to think that H2O might be the worst one, or really close to the bottom. But we'll see when we get to that one. So overall, I think that Halloween 2 is still technically the best one, even with its faults, because it takes what the first one did and perfects everything. You know, more kills, more atmosphere. It just looks better. It's shot better. It's scarier on pretty much every level. It's just better. It's better. And as I said, if you want to watch Halloween, you really need to watch the two movies back to back, because it really is just one long movie that was shot, you know, a couple years apart. So Halloween 1, I gave a 6 out of 10, I believe. Halloween 2, I'm going to give a 9. If it wasn't for those stupid stings and jump scare stuff where it wasn't even jump scares, it was just Michael would show up and they would just have like this loud noise for no reason. If they would have got rid of that, it would have been a 10 and it would still be the best horror movie ever. I'm going to say, from memory at least, the last horror movie that I watched besides Halloween Kills, which Halloween Kills right now is going to be tied for what the best Halloween movie was. And also, I'll bring up one more thing in a second. Nightmare on Elm Street 3, I think, is the best horror movie ever. I think 2 is incredibly underrated, and we'll eventually get to those at some point. Maybe next October, I don't know, but I want to talk about those at some point as well. The Nightmare on Elm Street series, because I think they're really misunderstood too. But Halloween 2 and Halloween Kills are pretty much on the same level. And one thing I've noticed, which I think is going to be really interesting when I watch Halloween 2018 again, is Halloween Kills is really trying to emulate a lot of what happened in Halloween 2, the original. You have the direct continuation of what happened from, you know, the first Halloween. So you had Halloween 1, and then it directly continues in Halloween 2. Then you had Halloween 2018, and it's a direct continuation of Halloween Kills. So they really do take a lot of cues from that where it's the same night. And I think Halloween Kills does it a little bit better. They both have Laurie in the hospital where she's not really doing much for most of the movie. And, you know, she's still, you know, trying to take down Michael in both movies, even though in the original Halloween 2, she's a lot more scared like she was in the first movie. Obviously, it's the same night. She's not going to turn into, you know, Super Sarah Connor within a few hours, but I can see the parallels where they're really trying to make that sort of distinction where Halloween 2018 was kind of meh, and then Halloween Kills was incredible. Now, I think it's going to be interesting when Halloween Ends, because Halloween Ends is going to be a trilogy where there really was no third movie in the Halloween original series. It was Halloween 1, Halloween 2, then Halloween 3 doesn't have Michael Myers in it, which is going to be the next movie I'm going to review. And I've never watched that movie. I've seen other people review it. I've heard all the hype about it. I've heard all the negativity around it. I've never watched Halloween 3 ever. I know about the Silver Shamrock Mask, and I know all that sort of stuff, but I've never sat down and let it envelop me, because I've noticed that if you watch a reviewer, they're trying to add in their little comedy bits. They're trying to add in all this stuff, which is fine, because that's just how you do it in this age. And I enjoy the Nostalgia Critic, and I enjoy Decker Shadow and all them, and I love, you know, their shows, and not putting them down at all. I think his name is Dr. Wolfula. He's cool too. I even, you know, really like some of the more obscure guys, like Horror Movie Review Guy, if he's still around. He was a friend of mine, great guy. But when you're watching a review that's like a play-by-play, you really don't get the atmosphere, the sound cues, the little nuances that makes these movies great. You know, you just are kind of missing it. I think the reviews are a lot better if you go watch the movie and then right after then go watch a review and see someone else's analysis of it. So for all these movies, I don't want you to take my word for it and say, oh yeah, Halloween 2 is the greatest one, and not go watch it. I want you to watch these movies, and if you disagree with me, you know, tweet at me, you know, at Jack Pierce Books on Twitter, or, you know, mine's the same tag pretty much anywhere out there. I'm pretty much Jack Pierce Books everywhere except for the Trax official Twitter, which I don't know why I have that. I don't really tweet out much on that. But the point is, I'm not going to waste any more time. Let's get into Halloween 3. All right, from here on out, spoiler alert for all of these movies, because if I don't have a spoiler review for the rest of these movies, my review of 4, 5, 6 won't make any sense, and neither will H2O and Resurrection. The reason I did spoiler free for the first two is because I really feel like those are more works of art, and that's something that I absolutely want you to watch with a clean eye and having no real bias going into either movie if you've never seen either one of them. So let's get on with Halloween 3, Season of the Witch. This movie is probably the most hated of all the Halloween sequels, and in a way I can understand why, according to my research, not to quote the Magic School Bus, mind you, it turned out that they really kind of teased that Michael Myers was going to be in this movie, and he isn't. And Haddonfield isn't in it, and Dr. Loomis isn't in it, and it has nothing to do with the first two Halloween movies. I'm fine with that. I knew going in that this had nothing to do with Halloween. I really came to this movie with a positive and open mind. I was really excited to see this because I love weird oddities, especially from John Carpenter. And this movie is so hard to really put a point on. I don't know if I like this movie or I just think it's just garbage. But there is no movie in existence that occupies the same spot that this one does for me, because it is the epitome of meh. It is a 5 out of 10 movie. I would say it had a great premise, but it doesn't. And it's one of those movies, it's so hard to explain because there's so much potential here, and I don't know, it just confuses me. The entire watching experience confused me. I watched it at my shop. I had no interruptions. I was watching on a 4K TV, on a Blu-ray. Everything set up nice speakers, nice everything. Did not get interrupted the entire time, and I still don't get it. I feel like the biggest problem with Halloween 3 is not the fact that Michael Myers isn't in it. I think it's that this story is just garbage. This is a bad episode of Tales from the Crypt, but it has some of that John Carpenter stuff in it that makes it worth watching at least once. It's not boring, I'll give you that, because I thought that the first Halloween was honestly a 30-minute chase sequence and the rest of it was pretty boring and not worth watching. This one's worth watching, but there are just some things that just really hold it back, and the biggest problem is the plot makes no sense at all. I don't get it. I was going into this thinking that I was going to get an atmospheric horror movie, sort of like a Jacob's Ladder or just a weird oddity, because the clips that I remember out of context were just so weird and surreal and hard to understand on their own that when I saw the full piece, I just was like, I mean, what am I really watching here? So this movie is all about a doctor that for some reason is on the hunt for this girl's father, because her father dies in his hospital, so he has to go find who killed the father. Fine. Mystery plot. I've done it before. I did it in the Snow White Murders. And I see some parallels to my writing that I would have written this a lot better than it did if it was like a novel. But I don't know what happened in the writing process. And I'm going to explain what I'm talking about really quick. I know I'm repeating myself, but I'm just trying to wrap my brain around it and trying to understand how I can put this where it would make sense, because the movie doesn't make sense. So he goes on this journey. This guy is 47 years old with this girl that is 23. These are their real ages at the time of filming this. And they get into like this love plot, kind of, sort of, where they have sex twice and he didn't ask how old she was. And it was just kind of creepy that this doctor was just hitting on everyone around him, acting like he was James Bond, but he just wasn't. And there's something about like these killer robot Terminator things that are going around and killing people for no reason at all. Like they have zero motive ever explained of why these robots exist, why they're killing people, or anything. And then there's this whole thing about the Ritual of Sauron or something, but the subtitle said Sam Hain, and then in Halloween 2 it said Sam Hain on the chalkboards. I don't know if it's supposed to be really Sauron or Sam Hain. I thought Sauron was something from Lord of the Rings, like, you know, the big monster, like the eye in the sky guy. That kind of rhymed, didn't it? But I just watched this and it was just weird, man. It was sort of like, I enjoyed it because I just was so confused. I wanted to see what happened next. But when the final scene came, I felt like I was just kind of watching a horrible Indiana Jones movie. Like, the movie, I guess, just wasn't long enough. It was an hour and a half, and I think that what happened, this is what I think happened. I think they had a idea. Not a good idea, but they had an idea of what they wanted to do. But when it came time to shoot this thing, they just kind of got a jumbled mess, and they just didn't have enough time to explain or to play out this plot. This movie doesn't have any filler. It doesn't have anything that gets in the way of the plot. They're not wasting time in this movie at all. It's just so much going on with no rhyme or reason. And I mean, the ending was just like, why? You know, somehow or another, his girlfriend, you know, the girl is way too young for him. That he's almost, I think he's actually, no, he's over twice her age. Turns out to be a robot. and they don't explain if she was a robot before, or they turned her into a robot, or what. Like, they never do. The entire thing was just a mess. But the reason I say it's not a horrible film and you should watch it at least once is just to see how insane this thing is. See, Jacob's Ladder is just completely insane. Like, it makes no sense and it's not supposed to make sense. But at least with Jacob's Ladder, it all kind of came to a head where it made sense why nothing made sense. This thing made no sense in a bad way. I just feel like they had an outline for a story and just had no idea how to execute it. But here's the thing, the acting is fine. The acting is fine, there's nothing wrong with it. The atmosphere is great, nothing wrong with it. It's just this story. I can't wrap my head around it. It's 5 out of 10. It really was something. It exists, is the best way I could say it. I keep wanting to say, oh, it had potential and they could have done something great with this. No, I don't think that anyone could pull a story out of this to make sense or be good in any way, shape, or form. It's literally an hour and 30 minutes of a creepy, balding, middle-aged guy smooching on a 20-year-old or 23-year-old the entire time, laced with some type of mystery plot that never really has a solution. I don't understand how this movie had so little plot or so little sense made out of it in an hour and 30 minutes. I felt like I was just confused the entire time, and that's the best way to put this one. This one is confusing. I respect that they tried to make something different. I get it, and I've talked about it on the show. Don't chase the dragon, and, pick a lane. We've talked about both of those. And this was just, no, it's a no. I don't hate it. I don't love it. I might need to watch it again. I really am thinking about just watching it again with an even more open mind and trying to understand this thing. I'm all for complicated plots and goofy stuff and the stuff from Hellraiser and all of that. But just, what is this? That's all I can say. I thought it was going to be weird and creepy and goofy in a good way. Sort of like Hellraiser Inferno. Perfect example of what I'm talking about, where you can take weird and creepy and stuff that makes no sense and make it all sort of come together correctly. This movie is just bad 80s cinema. It's worth a watch. 5 out of 10. Let's get to Halloween 4, where Michael Myers returns. One more thing. I really hate that Silver Shamrock song. It was used too much and it was annoying. 4 out of 10. Next. All right, Halloween 4. Just finished watching that, and this marathon is starting to kind of get on me a bit. It's just, I've never really sat down and watched an entire film series, and then I started thinking, there's 8 more movies after this, isn't it? Because you have Halloween 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, Resurrection, H2O, so that's 8. Then you have the Rob Zombie movies, that's 10, and then 2018 and Halloween Kills. So this is really an undertaking, but anyway, not complaining at all. Been enjoying it so far. Just have a deadline of 11 days to watch 8 more movies. But Halloween 4, honestly, is a bit of a conflicted one for me. I love this movie. It is never going to be as good as Halloween 2 or Halloween Kills, but I do love Halloween 4. And I know that I love Halloween 5 as well, with all its flaws. I think Jamie was a perfect character for this trilogy of movies where they have a different lead that is trying to run away from Michael Myers. So she works well, and it's one of the best child actor performances I've ever seen, especially for a horror movie, which is incredible. She really ticks most of the boxes that Jamie Lee Curtis did in the first 2, which is awesome. There are a few callbacks to the first one, which is awesome. There are more scares in this one, where I think that there are more scares in this one that would actually stay with you after you watch the movie. But overall, the movie isn't that scary. And I think the biggest problem is the atmosphere. Halloween 1 and 2 made you dread it a lot more. And by this point in the series, they took a lot more flavoring from Friday the 13th. So it was a lot more unrealistic and a bit more corny. But honestly, I really, really think this is a great movie. I think it's shot well, it's acted well, directed well. The biggest problems with this movie are Michael Myers' mask, because it looks stupid. And I think everyone has said that before, that it just does not look good at all. It's not scary. It looks like someone else put on the mask and was imitating him. which if that was the case, I'd be fine with, because my favorite Friday the 13th was part 5, which I know is very controversial. Mainly because it had the most kills and I just enjoyed it, and there was only like 30 seconds of the movie that ruined it for everyone. I mean, you really could have just cut that 30 seconds out and it would have still been a Friday the 13th movie. So this one really is just a good one. And the Thorn trilogy, I think, gets way too much flack. Honestly, I know the story is stupid, but I feel like this is the right way to do this series, is to have a continuation where Dr. Loomis comes back and they kind of sort of explain how they got past the ending of Halloween 2, and it's not very satisfactory, but for a reboot in the series, trying to bring it back after, I believe it was 6 years, because I think Halloween 3 came out in 1982 and this one came out in, I believe, 1988. Maybe wrong, but this was basically a reboot because the third one kind of killed the franchise for a while. And this one reinvigorated it. This one brought it back where people wanted to see more Halloween movies, and it did well enough at the box office for people to make more of them. And one unsung hero of this series, besides Donald Pleasance and, Carpenter, which everyone loves them, I really think that we need to appreciate Mustafa Akkad a lot more. And he was the executive producer for Halloween 1 through Resurrection. His main job was to get the money, to deal with the legal side of it, to basically make it where these movies could even be made on the back end of it, because a lot of people don't think about that. Thank you, Mustafa, and I hope you are in a better place now. He unfortunately died not long after Halloween Resurrection came out. But without Mustafa, there really wouldn't be a series. While Carpenter was a mainstay and he created the character of Michael Myers and all of that, he really wasn't as involved in the sequels as Mustafa Akkad was and a few others, because I don't think he really even wrote any of the movies except for the first maybe one. I don't think he even wrote 2 or 3, but he was just in there for like the music and all of that, of course, because it's his score. But rest in peace, Mustafa Akkad. And I think this is a really good one. I think you should give this one a second look. I think it's unfairly hated, honestly. It did have a few scary moments and the kills were okay. There's nothing wrong with them, but there's just something not really as scary about this one than the other two. I think the biggest problem is it lacks some of the artistic direction that the first two had. And it's really hard to explain without showing you in particular, but this movie really doesn't have any shots or angles or chase scenes that really grab me the way that the chase from the first one did, or the second one, which the second one was actually weaker than the first. I can't explain it. I think the biggest problem when it comes to the chases is I feel less invested, mainly because Laurie really was someone who had no idea who this was. The audience didn't know who this was or what his powers were or why he was doing this. And I think that made it a lot scarier than a guy in a white mask hunting his niece, But this one has a lot more of that Halloween atmosphere that the first 3 movies kind of lacked, because I've heard other reviewers say it, and I kind of agree with them, that the first 2 Halloween movies really don't have that much to do with the holiday itself. Beyond a few people walking around, I guess, in trick-or-treating in costumes, but it doesn't have a stick of a Halloween atmosphere as this one. So I give it a thumbs up. Rating overall, let's give this one let's just say 7.5 out of 10. I think that's fair. It could be an 8, but it's above average, but not the greatest the series had to offer. So I really enjoyed it, and let's get on to Halloween 5. Halloween 5, let's talk about this one. This isn't a Halloween movie at all. This is a Friday the 13th movie with Michael Myers in it. Ooh, this one is bad, like really bad. Not in a way that is unwatchable or boring, because we'll get to that later in the series, but this one completely missed the mark. This one completely forgot what the point of Michael Myers was. There isn't much stalking in this one. There isn't much anything in it that you wouldn't see from something like Friday the 13th Part 6, Jason Lives, or any of the latter day Jason movies, which are great. But to me, this is just an okay movie. There's a lot more going on than the first movie, of course, because I know the first movie is a classic and all of that, but this one just doesn't work on a lot of levels. And there are actually two scenes in this, which I reference quite a bit, and they are what saves this movie from basically being a trash can movie. One is a scene that has terrified me since I've seen it, and it's bugged me for life, and I don't think it'll ever stop bugging me. There's a scene where one of the girls, can't even remember her name at this point, but she goes in the closet and grabs a jacket, and Michael's in there, but she doesn't see him somehow. And she turns her back, and you just see him sort of almost teleporting slowly into the closet, and then he follows her around the house and stabs her with scissors. Oh my God. Because that just makes me so worried that he's going to be in the closet or under a blanket or something else, because he was able to do it like that. And she was right there. I mean, somehow she couldn't see this huge guy in her little tiny closet, and just, ooh. Then another one was where Jamie is laying in his coffin thing in the attic for some reason, and right before he is trying to stab her, she, says uncle, and then he just stops and takes his mask off, and you just see like this lone tear go down his face. Like, it adds a lot to the character, where most of the time Michael is just like this ruthless killer just trying to kill his family for no reason. But that one moment always made me wonder, does Michael really want to kill these people, or is he like out of control? Like, he can't do anything about it. There's something in him that he just can't do anything about. And that's scary, the idea that somebody who was sane is being taken over by this thing that they wish they could get rid of, that they wish they could stop, that they would do anything to escape from. Because we all know in the Thorn trilogy, Michael can't die. So it's not like Michael could go off and kill himself to get away from this fate. So it shows a bit of remorse, and that's never really seen for the rest of the series. So it adds a little bit of depth that's not really in any of the other characters, where they just are evil to be evil. It just makes you kind of wonder if Michael really wants to kill, if it's in his instinct, or he is being forced to by some demon or curse, really. And that's the biggest thing that saves this movie, is just that context. The rest of the movie is pretty much awful, though. The whole idea of they're psychically linked for some reason now. And every time Michael killed somebody, well, not every time, but most of the times Michael killed somebody, she would just like convulse and freak out, and she could somehow see it, and it just didn't work for me. It reminded me a lot of Friday the 13th Part 6, I believe it was, where Tommy Jarvis is, chasing down Jason Voorhees, trying to basically do the Dr. Loomis thing. And, I think he had like a psychic link with Jason or something, and just, it didn't work at all. And I know that Jason 6 is probably one of the highest rated movies of that series, but honestly, we'll get to that series at some point. But I think that Jason Part 6, or Friday the 13th Part 6, Jason Lives, is one of the worst in that series, mainly because of all the censorship in it. Like, it's censored so many kills that the kills had no impact at all in that movie. But this one doesn't do that, thankfully. And I'm not going to say that this is a unwatchable movie by any standard. It's a mediocre movie, sort of like, I don't know which one to compare it to, really, because it's not as bad as Halloween 3 was, but it's just extremely generic, like as generic as you could get. This one was completely phoned in, and overall it just lacked all the atmosphere, all the scary, all the horror, just all of it. It was just a really, really generic, churned out slasher movie. There's no point really watching it unless you want to see the Thorn trilogy, but we'll see when we get to Halloween Part 6. I forgot what it's called. I think it's The Curse of Michael Myers, or The Revenge, or something. The one that's the final movie in the Thorn trilogy, which is a lot more brutal from what I remember, but it's also not a great movie. And it also has two different versions, which I'm not going to watch both versions. I don't have the time. We literally have to get this out by the 31st, and I already have 7 more movies to watch. So I might watch some type of video that sort of just shows you the differences of the things that are like added in each version, and I can kind of do like a overall review of the 6th one and see what happens. But overall, Halloween 5, I just don't like this movie. I don't like it at all. It had a few moments, but it's just too generic to really remember. It's very forgettable. That's the way I'll put it. It's a 6, right on par with the first one, because there's nothing inherently wrong with it if it was a Jason movie, but it's not. So yeah, let's just go with a 6. And that's my rating for that one. So let's go on to Halloween 6 and see if that got any better. And I feel like it's not going to. And honestly, the more I think about this series, the more I'm thinking H2O is probably going to be in the bad tier, like in the 4 out of 10, because as much as I love Scream, and the guy that wrote Scream wrote Halloween H2O, I just, for some reason, compared to the Thorn trilogy even, it's just not going to turn out well. So we'll see what happens when we get to that part of this podcast, but I'll see you in a moment for my review of Halloween 6. All right, so Halloween 6. This one is going to be the oddball out of the entire review that I'm doing here. That's because there's 2 different versions of the same movie. I honestly barely could get through the theatrical version. And I'm just going to give a shout out to a few horror creators who basically watched it for me and made my job a lot easier for this particular one. And I'm going to explain why I can't stand this particular entry. So shout out to Haunted Hippie, Dead Meat, Cody Leach, and Decker Shadow. I'm sure they don't know anything about this show. Probably have never heard of me, but so thanks to all of them. And let's get on with why I couldn't watch this movie, basically. Halloween 6 is the weirdest entry out of all of it, because I feel like with this movie, they got one thing right and everything else wrong. The only thing they got right in this entire movie was atmosphere, because this one is the most surreal, weird, strangely shot, most visually interesting out of all of them so far. I'll put it that way. Halloween 1 and 2 are wonderful, but this one just has this almost like sci-fi movie quality. You know, like where you watch those really cheap sci-fi movies, like the sequels to Anaconda and, you know, the Python movies, or, you know, I guess Carnosaur and all that other sort of low budget, weird 90s horror that would only come on sci-fi, or I'm not sure what, like FX or something. Like, it would come on those things where like they're so bad they're good. That's the atmosphere I get from this. This is almost like a TV movie, the way it's shot anyway. And I like that. I like it because I like the really cheap, low-budget look of movies like Bloody Murder and Are You Scared and stuff like that. So I enjoy that sort of 60 frames a second camera work that they do because, you know, you can tell it's cheap and rough. The best way to explain this is soap opera cameras. I don't watch soap operas, but they do use those cheap digital camcorders that do 60 frames per second. And that's a common way of explaining this, but I enjoy that sort of look since most film is shot in 24 frames, or maybe it was just a version I was watching before I quit. Here's what I don't like about this movie and why I had to quit and kind of cop out and go watch these 4 creators. Number 1, I don't have enough time to watch 2 separate versions of the same movie. Number 2, I detest torture porn in pretty much every regard. I like Saw to an extent. Mainly because they had a great first movie and they had a plot, while convoluted and stupid at times, was enjoyable enough to justify the gore factor. See, I'm not a big fan of like Hostel and all of that. I think Hostel is terrifying, but I never really would put that in any of my, you know, favorite movies because it's just not. And I get that feeling from this movie where the previous 5 movies had their moments where it was kind of subtle and, you know, the kills weren't super gory and they were tame, and that was scary enough because gore is not scary and neither are jump scares. Those are like the top 2 things I really don't like in horror, is excessive gore and jump scares. Sort of like a great way to put this is I love Mortal Kombat and I love the original games, but like, you know, the fatalities were over the top and yeah, they were gory and all that. But there's a difference between gore on a comical level like Mortal Kombat 3 and gore in Mortal Kombat 10, where you're literally like slicing someone's face off and you see all the veins and the skin and the, you know, it's just gross out at that point. It's like, that's not enjoyable. I'm sure maybe that's what it looks like in real life, but I don't care. And here's the reason they did that, because they originally had a producer's cut that apparently audiences or critics or whatever, when they saw it, didn't like it for whatever reason. So they made a theatrical cut, which was like a re-edited, just insane mess of a story version that had a lot more gore in it. And that's what they went with. Now, I'm not really going to go too in depth with this. If you want to watch a good breakdown of the theatrical version, go watch Dead Meat or Decker Shadow. I think Decker Shadow might cover both. Haunted Hippie did a good job when it comes to Halloween 6, their producer's cut. I'm just kind of disgusted by this movie because the thing was, Halloween always had subtlety, a lot of it, you know, where we didn't really know exactly why Michael was doing it. But now we have them almost trying to intersect Halloween 3 with Halloween 4, 5, and 6, which is what I noticed, and I don't hear any other reviewers bringing that up. And maybe it's because I just watched Halloween 3 a few days ago, and then I'm watching this so I can see the comparison where we have another Celtic cult, and that's the reason why people are getting killed. And it just doesn't work for me. I don't enjoy that. I don't enjoy ghost films or, you know, haunted houses and stuff like that. I just don't like that anywhere near as much as I like stuff like, you know, Friday the 13th and Halloween, the original, you know, movies, the first two, or stuff like that. I think they just went so far off the rails with this one that they were just lost. They didn't know what they were doing with this series at all. And this came out in 1995, and Scream came out in 96. So I was looking at it at first because there were some kills in the theatrical cut that really were similar to Scream, like the guy getting hung up in the tree and all that. But this is just a bad fan film, is what I could say it as. It really doesn't have any of the elements to make Halloween beyond Michael Myers and, you know, people getting stabbed, but there's just something inherently wrong with this film. And it's just, I'm not going to give it a super low rating. I'm not going to say I hate it or it's unwatchable, but as a Halloween fan, I'd put it down there with the Rob Zombie stuff. And Halloween H2O is next, and I'm just gonna get so much flack for that one. But I think Halloween H2O might be at the bottom, so Halloween's in a very rough spot right here. What would I give Halloween 6 overall? If it was based on atmosphere and they toned down the kills in the theatrical cut, and they actually, you know, thinned out the plot a little bit or made more sense of stuff, because it brought another problem, just like Halloween 3, where you have so many ideas, but none of them come to fruition. So you end up with the movie that's confusing, and you're just sort of looking at like, what? If they would have ironed all that stuff out, toned down the gore, made the story make a bit more sense, or just get rid of that stupid Thorn idea entirely, it would be right there with Halloween 5. It would be a 6. As it stands, it's a 5. Like I said, the atmosphere alone gives it 5 points, but the rest of it gives it like 0 points. So I just really do not like this film. I just think it's a really bad Halloween movie. It would be a great sci-fi movie if it wasn't about Michael Myers, if they were just doing some really goofy cult stuff for like some Sci-Fi or FX or TNN or even a Law and Order episode. Then it would be more like a 6 or a 7, but I'm looking at this movie in the context of the entire series. I'm not looking at this as just simply a movie on its own, because we're in a trilogy, basically, so you have to kind of base it on the previous films. And then we go on to Halloween H2O, which happened because this film was another bomb, just like the one from Part 5. And honestly, H2O, I'm not looking forward to watching it again. But we'll see what I think. I think it will be better than the Thorn trilogy, but at the same time, it's going to be in the lower tier as well. And we'll get into why I think that in a moment. All right, let's talk about Halloween H2O. This was my first Halloween film. I was a huge fan of Scream when it came out, and I still think the first Scream is a good movie. It has aged really poorly, in my opinion, mainly because of just the 90s-ness of it and just how ridiculously over-the-top 90s it is compared to like the 80s stuff where it's nowhere near as in your face about it, except for like, I guess, Friday the 13th Part 7, whatever the one was where they had the psychic chick or the black guy on the toilet getting stabbed or whatever. That one was really weird and a little too much 80s going on. Same with like Friday Part 8. But anyway, we're not talking about Friday the 13th. Halloween H2O. This movie, was written by the same guy who wrote all the Scream movies. I like the Scream movies, but it doesn't work here. Halloween, at this point in the series, has kind of lost the plot of what makes a Halloween movie a Halloween movie. You could easily take Ghostface and put him in this movie and take Michael Myers out. There's this plot where they try to have Jamie Lee Curtis and Michael have this final showdown, but it doesn't work, and I'm going to explain why. Halloween, to me, was always about the unknown and a slow-paced, subtle affair where it felt really realistic, where the only thing that didn't feel like it could actually happen was Michael getting shot and getting back up. Because it's easy to imagine a guy breaking out of an insane asylum, getting the mask and going around stabbing babysitters. That is completely possible. It is easy to believe, and it is terrifying. And they kept that sort of idea throughout the series, where it was Michael hunting someone and his family. This movie just doesn't understand Halloween from a plot level, from a writing level, from anything, which is kind of strange because Scream had so many homages to Halloween, the first one at least, and this is just a bad teen movie with Michael Myers killing people in very uncreative, boring, and just dumb ways. Like, do we really need to have the whole thing where Michael stabs somebody in the back 100 times? It just looks like bad 90s cinema. It's just a really bad movie. You know, it did help me get into Halloween as a kid because it seems like I always pick the worst thing of any franchise to be my jumping off point. Let me explain. My first Halloween movie was H2O. My first Metallica album was Saint Anger. My first Megadeth album was The System Has Failed, which is still good, has a few good songs on it. And my first Hellraiser movie was Inferno, which basically was a Jacob's Ladder ripoff. I still love Inferno for how stupid and goofy it is, and we will eventually do a Hellraiser-a-thon where I review all of those in order one day, but this movie doesn't hold up. It just doesn't. I don't enjoy it at all. I think it's boring. I think it's long. I think it's stupid. The kills aren't interesting at all. The characters aren't interesting. There's only really about 5-10 minutes of this entire movie that's worth watching, and that's the chase sequence where Laurie and Michael finally look at each other through that window. And at that moment, it kind of makes you realize that Michael doesn't really have a motive for this movie, does he? Because when he sees Laurie, he's just kind of like, wait, who are you again? Like, what's the point? See, almost all the other Halloween movies, regardless of how bad they were, Michael had a reason to kill people. In the first 6, he was trying to kill his family. And this one, nothing. There's no reason here. I don't even think that they just... See, I can't even talk because I just don't get it. I don't get what they were trying to go for with this. They were trying to basically make Scream into a Halloween movie because they figured that's what would sell. And I'm sure it did for the time, but this one and Resurrection are usually thought of as the high and low points where everyone's like, oh, H2O is great. It's one of the best ones. And, you know, Resurrection came along and ruined the entire series. Well, let's see what I think when I get to Resurrection in a few minutes. But overall, Halloween H2O is an overrated sack of crap. 2 out of 10. This isn't even a Halloween movie. You know, when I think about it, it makes me appreciate the Thorn trilogy more because at least Michael had a purpose in those. And I don't think he has a purpose in Resurrection either. And that's why they finally had to do a hard reboot with the Rob Zombie disasters, which I am just dreading. I don't like those movies at all. I'm already going to tell you they're both zeros, but oh boy. And I saw both of them in the theater, by the way, but we'll get to those when we get to those. But Halloween H2O, just no. Just no. Halloween H2, no. I don't care how cheesy that sounds. Just next movie. All right, so let's talk about Halloween Resurrection. This is the one that I'm going to get the most flack for, if not H2O. I think Resurrection is underrated, and I know that that's controversial amongst the Halloween fans and horror fans in general, but if you watch it now, you'll get a lot more appreciation for it, I think. While it's dumb, and the whole trick-or-treat, you know, I can't say the rest of the line because safe for work. Besides that line, this is what Halloween needed. It needed something so stupid and so goofy in spots that it made the movie enjoyable. The problem with Halloween 5 and 6 and H2O was that they were so serious and so just spectacularly bad, story-wise, script-wise, that it was almost like a no fun allowed sort of movie series at that point. I get it. They were trying to be the first two, but even in the first two, there was a lot of goofiness. There was a lot of funny stuff in them. If you go back all the way to Halloween 2, you know, Amazing Grace, come sit on my face. You know, just goofy little stuff like that. But they just took themselves way too seriously in the movies leading up to this one. And I think that them adding a little bit of comedy to this was not a bad idea. The kills are much better than H2O. And I actually like the sort of haunted house aspect of this. And I like the Big Brother concept because we have today where people like to do these ghost hunting shows and the IRL streams and all of that. So I feel like this movie is hated because it's not the best one, of course, but at the same time, it's a lot more relevant today than it was back then when we didn't have IRL streaming, or we didn't have Twitch, we didn't have YouTube, we didn't have any of that stuff back then, you know, user created content like we do now. Is the story stupid? Yes. Is the concept stupid? Yes. Is Busta Rhymes stupid? Yes. But they tried something different. And on some levels, it actually works. As I said, the kills, they're good. The atmosphere is good in a lot of spots. The story is okay. The only thing I would really knock it for, beyond just some of the sillier moments, I guess, and it's a little bit dated in spots, is just Michael's mask. I don't understand why they haven't understood since the first movie, you know, the blackest eyes. I looked into his eyes and there was nothing there. And just almost every movie after that, it seemed like you could see Michael's eyes. And maybe you could in the original. I mean, I'm kind of far away from it now, but that's something that you could easily fix by getting the actor to wear some black makeup around their eyes. Like, you know, just take the little face paint, put it around your eyes, on your eyelid, all of that, and give the guy some black contacts. And you could get that, you know, blackest eyes look if they make black contacts. I don't know if they do. I guess they do. They have to, probably. I'm very sure they make the white ones. This movie is unfairly hated. I really think so. And I always kind of had a little bit of a guilty pleasure for this one. Is it as good as the first two? No. Is it as good as Halloween 4? No. Is it as good as Halloween Kills? No. Is it as bad as 6 or H2O? No. It's just sort of a middling film. I would put it, like, if you wanted to do like grades instead of A through F, I would give this one a C. It's not a bad film, especially when you look at it in a modern context where we have this sort of technology going. Yeah, it's goofy, and yeah, it's techno babble, and yeah, it's cheesy, but we needed something at this point. I mean, if you really think about it, a good parallel to this is the Bond series, where James Bond had a few too many Connery movies and people started getting tired of it because it was too serious and it was getting a little too hokey and the stories were a bit bland, and, you know, you could tell that Sean didn't care anymore. But then you get Roger Moore, who brought something new to the role, being a lot more goofy and lighthearted and more campy, and people love that because it, you know, it worked. And I feel like the same thing with this, that it's not a great movie. I'm not going to say it's some masterpiece, but honestly, when you watch it as like an oddity or something where they at least tried something different, you have to give it credit for that. So this one's a C. I'm going to put it at a 6.5. Actually 7. Let's just say 7 out of 10. That would be the most fair, I would say, for it. It's a product of its time, but I honestly think that the whole Myers house being haunted thing with IRL streaming would be really neat if someone turned it into like a web series or something. So I enjoyed this one overall. Let's get on to the Rob Zombie stuff. Good God. So I just watched Halloween 1 and 2 from Rob Zombie. Yes, I'm going to review them both in this one block. No, I'm not going to itemize every problem I have with this because that would take hours. This is the one that I'm going to get the most flack for. I don't like Rob Zombie. I think he is overrated. I think his music is bland and he's written the same song over and over again. And I think that all of his movies are just like the Resident Evil movies. They are literally created just to give his wife a movie career. I know that people love the guy and he might be really cool and everything. And yeah, he pretty much tried to make a new Texas Chainsaw sort of thing because everybody's like, oh my God, The Devil's Rejects and The House of a Thousand Corpses is so great. I hated those movies too. You know why? Because they're both Texas Chainsaw Massacre ripoffs. I get that he is a staple in the horror community. I get that he is well loved and probably a great guy, but his movies suck and his music sucks and he just sucks. And his wife sucks. She was hot at one point, and that's the only reason that most people care about Sherry Moon Zombie. It's because she's hot, or was hot. I don't know about now. So what's wrong with this movie? He does the same thing he does in every movie. Stupid rednecks get killed. And I'm not offended because I am Southern. It's just, he takes Southern culture to such an extreme that it's just like a really bad parody. Like, I'm trying to understand this. It's almost like he's trying to be funny or something, but it's just not, and it's just cringe. I just don't understand it. See, I was so excited for Halloween, the first one, and the second one that Zombie did when I was younger, because I loved Halloween, and anything Halloween or Michael Myers, I was all over it. You know, I could literally watch anything back then. This is before I saw 4, 5, 6, though. I don't know why I didn't see them. I saw them when I was in my 20s. So I watched the first one. And within the first 15 minutes, I already knew what the problem with this movie was. We don't need a Michael Myers backstory. And if we do need a Michael Myers backstory of this length, it needs to be better. This movie is basically Hannibal Rising with Michael Myers. That's really what's going on with at least the first 20 minutes of this movie. And once again, we've brought back the needless gore and just a really bad camera lighting where you can't see anything and just annoying characters and just there's nothing good about these two movies. I don't care that Sherry Moon Zombie was hot at some point. I don't care. His movies are trash. This is trash. This is just garbage. I mean, The Devil's Rejects I thought was enjoyable. Okay, so maybe what, like 1 out of 4 movies was decent. And this isn't like a hate boner for Rob Zombie. He's never said anything rude to me on Twitter or anything. It's just, he's just so overrated. It just hurts my head that people just, he makes Halloween H2O look good, and that was terrible. He makes Scream 3 look good, and that was actually not that bad, I don't think. It was pretty bad, though. I just don't get it. I don't get the love for the guy. I don't hate him as a person. I really don't. And I think that he is a huge fan of horror, and he has his own brand of horror, which is basically just Texas Chainsaw Massacre with his spin on everything he does. I don't get it. See, they just try to add in that stupid stuff about a white horse and his ghost mom and just another reason for Sherry Moon Zombie to be in this movie. Well, the second one, I mean. And I saw Halloween 2 in theaters. I'm already done ranting about Halloween 1. The kills are dumb. The whole thing is dumb. It's just bad. It's just an awful movie. But 2 took it to a new level where I think Halloween 2, Rob Zombie's movie, is the worst movie in the franchise and probably one of the worst movies ever. I'm a guy that loves movies that are just awful quality, like Criminally Insane from like 1976 or whatever, you know, the one that's like Crazy Fat Ethel Part 1. And it was shot on like a 10p phone or something. It just looked awful. But I loved it because it had atmosphere, because it was stupid, because it was over the top, because you could tell that the people had passion that were making this thing, and they embraced it. They embraced the stupidity of those movies. I can get into lo-fi cinema. I enjoy it. As you've seen, I did a fan edit of a fan movie called Halloween, The Death of Michael Myers. It was made in 1996 as a direct sequel to Halloween 6. And I think that that's a great movie, and I wish they would have done more of those. I think they actually did. They made a couple more. We'll talk about that on a different Trax episode, because I'm actually thinking about mixing up this show, because I just think that being Mr. Feeney is kind of dumb. And I'm starting to get my love for horror back, so we might be switching to a different sort of style for Trax as a whole. But we're still going to be doing the Are You Afraid of the Dark reviews and the audiobook stuff. But the first segment, I think I'm going to do something else with. I've been wanting to change anyway to a more horror thing versus, you know, because I've already taught you what I can about writing and about, you know, being an author, and I don't want to turn into a political channel plus horror movies. So we're going to change in season 3. But back to the point of this. Halloween 2 is shot in such a way that every kill has two problems. One, it's too dark to see anything. And two, it's always like this really up close shaky cam. Ooh, looks scary, big stuff going on. Like, just why? Why do you do that? Like, most of the movie is just a bunch of screeching and nothing happening. And when something does happen, you can't see it. I saw this movie in theaters. Not at the best theater, not the real fancy one where I used to live, but it was a different one because it was cheaper and I was broke. I think I saw this movie for like $2 because back then you could actually go in this really old like 1970s theater. It was like $2 or $3 just to get the ticket. You know, popcorn was $5 or whatever, but still. And I sat down and watched this with a bunch of other people. And I was hyped. I was like, yeah, I love Halloween. And Halloween, you know, from Rob Zombie was pretty decent, I thought back then. And then I watched this, and I don't think anybody in the theater got it, because as soon as the movie was over and, you know, Michael takes his mask off and die, and that was just so stupid. After that happened, people just started laughing at it in the theater. Like, there was just like an uproar. And then when the movie ended, someone screamed at the top of their lungs, "What?" And like everyone coming out of the theater was like, that was awful. Everyone in the theater were just talking amongst themselves outside about how dumb, pointless, crappy, and garbage that movie was. And it still is. Rob Zombie is a hack. Let's get on to Halloween 2018. Let's talk about Halloween 2018. Oh boy. I thought the Rob Zombie movies were bad. This one completely misses the point of Halloween. So I think this is probably, in my opinion, one of the worst ones, if not the worst. I simply find almost nothing redeeming about Halloween 2018. I think it's boring. I think it's dumb. And it just doesn't get the point of Michael Myers as a villain, period. You know, over the years, we've had Michael Myers be himself in the first two movies, which is great, where he's stealthy and scary and sneaks in your back door and all of that. But this movie just doesn't get it. And I don't know why so many people praise this movie as it's the best one and, you know, the best sequel of all of them, as if they didn't see Halloween 2 from 1981, which was like the most underrated of the series, I think. So many people just overlook Halloween 2 from 81 for some reason, and I just don't get it, because Halloween 2 from 81 took exactly what Halloween 1 was lacking and fixed it all. And I feel the same way about how Halloween Kills did this with Halloween 2018, where Halloween Kills is incredible, Halloween 2018 kind of sucks. Not saying Halloween 1 from 78 is abysmal failure, but it's just boring. Like, first hour is boring. And even the kills are boring, you know, by modern standards. And I'm a horror fan. I love Michael Myers. He's my favorite killer out of all of them. I think that he is the greatest horror villain ever. But you know what? This movie just sucks because it doesn't understand Michael Myers. It does really well when it comes to you believing that this is taking place on Halloween, but they're basically taking what Rob Zombie did and screwed up in Halloween 1 and 2, where Michael Myers is this super brutal killer that just, you know, beats people to death or rips teeth out, or just all this unnecessary stuff that he did not do in the first two movies, which were the basis for the entire series. Well, let's just even say the first 5 movies, because honestly, how gory did he really get in the first 5 movies, even though, you know, 3 wasn't him? He didn't. And I don't get it. It's not that I don't like gore, because obviously I'm in the horror business and, you know, I have some gore in the books, but there's a difference between gore, like Scream, where the guy gets his guts ripped out and all that, like, you know, the shock value of the first kill of the movie, where even then, like, the gore in some versions is like censored, and then other versions it's only there for like 2 or 3 seconds, where it doesn't really relish in it. It doesn't throw it in your face like, hey, look at this, the guy's got gutted. It's just sort of there, and it's like a passing image, and then it immediately moves on. I feel like these later Halloween movies almost relish in it. Like, they make gore and just this disgusting effects like their main focus, and that's just not how it should work at all. Just anyway. And jump scares too, I hate those. I just think that they should be taken out of all horror films. I know that there never will be, but I think that they are just irritating. They don't do anything for me. They take me out of the movie entirely. but they just don't get Michael Myers. I'm going to explain why. Michael Myers essentially walks around and just kills people. And there's no suspense. There's no atmosphere. There's no dread. There's none of that at all in this entire movie. It's just bland and boring. Like the worst kill of the entire movie that just offended me and made me give this one a 0 when I first saw it, and I'm still going to give it a 0 now, is the one where everyone's talking about how they have this long tracking shot of Michael walking around the house, and then the girl's on the phone, and you see him in the background, and he just walks up to the girl, grabs her head, stabs her in the back of the neck, leaves. That's not Michael Myers. That's not any of the classic horror villains. You know why? Because they were subtle. They didn't just walk up and stab somebody willy-nilly for no reason, then walk out. That's not scary. That's as scary as seeing someone on The Sopranos get shot. Where's the suspense? Where is the dread? Where is him sneaking around the house and you wondering where he is and if she's going to get out of there safe, or is he going to jump up and get her, or whatever? There's no suspense in this movie, like none. There's no dread. There's no suspense. It's just gore and boring kills and them trying to be funny with the little black kid, which, you know, he was kind of funny. He was the best part of the movie, honestly. You need to give him his own movie that's not in Halloween. But this isn't Halloween. This isn't even like bad Friday the 13th either. This is just bad cinema to me. I just hate this movie entirely, because the thing was, the original Halloween series, you know, until like 6, because even 4 and 5 had their moments where they kind of got it still, and so did even Resurrection and H2O. Michael Myers is slow, he is sneaky, he is scary. He is someone that you could believe could actually exist. A guy could get a jumpsuit and a white mask and go around and kill people and sneak through their houses and all that. You can believe it. Michael Myers' entire character and his entire pitch is a maniac with a knife sneaks in your house and kills you. But the two Rob Zombie ones and this one don't get it. Halloween Kills got it. They finally got a whiff of what Halloween was supposed to be like. That's my biggest complaint, is that the trilogy of garbage that I'll call Halloween 1, 2, and 2018, is they're trying to be so modern and so of its time, trying to basically just be a modern film, that it loses its identity entirely. Because here's the thing, when you watch Halloween 1978, beyond the fact that they have those rotary phones, do you know what era this is? Does it really make you think that I'm back in the 70s? Or would you say it's maybe the 80s, maybe the 90s, maybe the 60s? You don't know. It's not shot in a way where it distracts you with the modernity of that day. And Halloween 2 is perfect for that, because that could take place in the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s, any of them. But these modern sequels just have this tendency to be way too obviously modern, with the smartphones, with the "we're doing a podcast, man," you know, that sort of stuff, even though I do a podcast, and just all of this meta stuff that just dates these movies horribly. And I fully know that Resurrection is probably the worst when it comes to all this. But the thing is, Resurrection was actually something different, where they were in such a rut where they couldn't get this movie series straight, where it was back to its roots or even decent, that they finally made one big goofy pile of cheese that it's enjoyable. This isn't enjoyable, and neither are the Rob Zombie movies, because they're boring. They're generic, they're boring, they're just poorly shot, poorly lit, poorly everything. The acting's terrible in all of these movies. The ending sucks in all of the movies. Dr. Loomis sucked in Halloween 1 and 2 because it was Malcolm McDowell or whatever his name is, and not Donald Pleasance. I mean, Donald Pleasance is dead. I know he died after Halloween 6, but we don't need... Why would you bring somebody else in to be the character of Dr. Loomis after Donald Pleasance died? You can't do it. Donald Pleasance is Donald Pleasance. Unless you can do some type of wacky CGI thing like they did in Terminator Dark Fate, where they made it look like it was really the kid John Connor from the original Terminator 2 getting shot at the beginning. Don't do it. And they did that in Halloween Kills, where they kind of did some type of CGI thing that made it look like it was really Loomis. If you want Loomis that bad, do Loomis. Like, you know, get Donald Pleasance, make like a CGI version of him or something. It would take a lot of work. But don't give me Loomis that's not Donald Pleasance. Okay, we're talking about two different movies anyway. This one, the kills are boring. They're too gory, they're boring, and they just have no suspense or build up. The acting is atrocious, except for Jamie Lee Curtis, because she is one of my god tier actresses. I love Jamie Lee Curtis in almost everything she's been in. She's good. She is fine. All right, here's another great example. Those modern Chucky movies, whatever the newest one was, I forgot what it was called. Maybe it was just Child's Play, because they keep forgetting sequels that existed. They try to modernize everything to the point where it's distracting, where you're adding, echo devices or, these smartphones like your iPhone. Someone always has an iPhone or an iPad or an iMac or, some type of other modern, insert technology of the day. And they kind of put that in the forefront for whatever reason. And I hate that. I hate where they focus on stuff that'll date the movie and just make it like openly pander to you in a way that just lacks all subtlety. So this is what that movie is. All right, let's get on with Halloween Kills, and I will see you after that, where I will give you a full ranking of all the movies and tell you what I think now that I've seen it all in context. See you in a bit. So I just watched Halloween Kills 2021. It just came out a couple of days ago, and I'm not going to give you any spoilers, but I'm going to tell you right now, as a Halloween fan, as someone who has watched every movie and can even see the good in something like Resurrection, and, not as much in the Rob Zombie stuff, I'm going to tell you what I think of this one. Now, I really did not like Halloween 2018 at all. I thought it was stupid, and I thought that they just kind of missed the point of Halloween altogether, and it was just bad, just really bad. And I think it was overrated because I guess people were just waiting for a Halloween movie, and they got it, and it just wasn't good to me. They just missed so many things that makes Michael Myers scary. Halloween Kills is an incredible overcorrection of all of the issues that I had with 2018 and most of the sequels. Halloween Kills, and I need to watch the entire series because that's what we're doing this year. Is on Halloween, I'm going to review every single Halloween movie on Trax and give my in-depth thoughts on all of them, or at least maybe not in-depth because that'll be like a 3-hour video, but it'll give me context for this movie because I haven't watched all the Halloween movies in a row in a long time. But as it stands right now, there isn't a better horror movie out there. There just isn't. Not a modern one. No. It's just, I can't believe that the trailer does not do this movie justice at all. I'm kind of struck where I can barely say anything because number one, I don't want to spoil it, but number two, my God, they finally got it. I think they finally got it. Is it better than the first two movies? It's close. It is so close because to me, Halloween 1 and Halloween 2 are one movie when you splice them together. They are the textbook on how to make a horror movie, and I love them. But this one is so close. It is. I want to say it's better than the first one. As much as I love Halloween 1, it really is a product of its time, and it's just not as amazing as this one. Is it better than Halloween 2, which is my favorite horror movie of all time? The original Halloween 2. Almost. I would put it on the same level. If you take Halloween 1 and Halloween 2, call it one movie. Call it a 3-hour movie or whatever it will be. If you say that is one movie combined, this movie is on equal footing as that one. Like, they're about equal. This movie really is what H2O should have been. My first Halloween movie was H2O, and I still think H2O has its merits, but my original favorites would be the second one, 4, 5, H2O. I don't really remember 6. And I thought Resurrection was okay. It had a concept, and I think Resurrection is unduly hated because to me, when I watch a movie, the number one thing I want you to do is make me care and make me want to keep watching this movie. And that's what didn't happen when I watched the Rob Zombie films. But Resurrection I could get on board with because while it was cheesy and it was stupid, it had a different concept and they were trying to do something that it would be a lot more relevant if they did that today. I think Resurrection really will be looked back on as a much better movie than it really was because, you know, of the whole live streaming thing and the IRL streaming on Twitch and all of that. So I feel like that is a bit more relevant today than it used to be. But let's just take this as a whole. Halloween Kills does one thing that no other horror movie has ever done. Not Scream, not Halloween, not Nightmare on Elm Street, not Friday the 13th, none of them. That is, it made me care about the characters. It made me care about the story. This is the equivalent of something like Stephen King's It, where instead of just having a bunch of kids to get killed by a killer clown, these people are real, they're acted perfectly, and there's just like this really tight story that goes throughout, and it's just so good. Like, it really reads like an incredible novel in a movie. They somehow got the depth of, you know, one of my novels, really, or maybe even a Stephen King novel, and sort of distillated it into this 2-hour movie, and they just did it right. The one thing that I would give it a little bit of a demerit on, and I kind of got over it, you know, as the movie went on, was the kills were a bit too gory. And I know that, you know, gore is a big thing in horror, but for me, Halloween was never really a gore fest. And Friday the 13th was gory, but this is a lot more than the Friday the 13th movies too. It's a little much, but I mean, I can't fault it for that. The other thing I would pin against it that is barely a gripe, honestly, I can forgive it because the story is so good and the atmosphere and everything else is just done right. The one thing I will give it that bugged me just a tiny bit is certain spots you see this absolute brilliance where they really do call back to Halloween 1 and 2 with the slow, methodical pace of certain scenes where kills aren't just sort of, you know, the guy jumps up and kills somebody. There are these really well-paced, really tense scenes that happen throughout, but they're kind of scattered. Because when you watch the original 2 Halloween movies, it's really well-paced. It's really, really slow, but at the same time, it kind of envelops you in this really, you know, Halloween atmosphere, and it's dark, and everything's dark for some reason, and you feel fearful for these characters. And I did feel fearful for a lot of them. And sometimes they would pull that off. And other times they would just have Michael sort of run out and kill somebody, which is fine. You know, you don't want the movie to be all slow like the original, because I don't think, you know, a new audience would really grab onto that as much. And sometimes, you know, I'm kind of dreading watching the original now versus something like this, where they kind of got the best of all the Halloween movies and just made it right, you know. And another movie I would love to compare this to is Terminator Dark Fate, because Terminator Dark Fate was a movie that I was really not interested in seeing, because I heard it was like woke propaganda and it was terrible, and everyone was complaining about, you know, the obvious spoiler about John Connor at the beginning and all of that. And it was just a bad movie. People said it's just, you know, it's terrible, just like Genesis or, you know, T3, which I thought Genesis was okay. It was dumb, but it was okay. My second favorite horror movie of all time is the original Terminator, because that's a horror movie to me. They really got the atmosphere right. They got the Halloween atmosphere, but made it with a killer that was hunting one particular person but killing people in the way. And I got that same sort of feeling of Terminator Dark Fate that I do with Halloween Kills. It is a movie that I wasn't really keen on seeing, but I knew I had to see it because I have to see all of them. You know, I can't skip a Halloween movie and I can't skip a Terminator movie. And both of them just shocked me at how good they were compared to what everyone else was saying. I love Terminator Dark Fate. I thought that that movie was wonderful. It was just great. I would even almost put it over the second one, because I'm not very big on the second one, because I always thought that, you know, you can't kill anyone. That was kind of stupid, you know. I get it. It's a good message, but it just kind of cut, you know, Arnold's balls off, kind of. And I didn't like that. But the reason I bring up the Terminator is because these two have kind of intersected, where you have Sarah Connor, who was scared of the Terminator in the first movie, and now she's come back as she's hunting the Terminator and trying to take him out, and like she's all super commando and everything. And they've done the same with Laurie Strode over time. You know, they've had her be, at least in 2018, and this one, they turned her almost into Sarah Connor, or tried to. And I like that parallel. I like that parallel a lot. I think that really does work. That the fact that Laurie had finally, you know, had enough and was done running and, you know, wanted to finally face her fear and just end it. Is there any weak points in this movie? Not really. I mean, not really. It really kept me involved the entire time. I really felt these characters. I wanted this movie to be twice as long as it really was. It was that well made, well acted, well scripted, well everything. I just wanted it to be longer. It needed to be longer. And I'm praying that when they do Halloween Ends, I think is what they're going to call it next year, that they're going to essentially do what Halloween 1 and 2 did and make that sort of like the end of a trilogy, because this one more or less picked up directly after Halloween 2018. And I'm praying that they do the same thing with Halloween Ends, where they just start where this ended and just, finally have its own Halloween 2 thing. And if they do that, and if they somehow pull off a movie as good as this one, it'll be probably the best horror movie trilogy of all time. I am not a big fan of 2018. I think it's the most skippable of all of them because they just didn't get the point. And I feel like whoever directed this or scripted this was listening to me or listening to inside my head, about what was wrong with 2018's Halloween. And they just fixed it. And the opening 10 minutes, my God, I want an entire movie like that. When Halloween Ends is put out, I want the next Halloween movie to just be not even a remake, but what they did with the first 10 minutes of this movie, which I'm not really going to spoil, but put it this way. They took it as almost a direct sequel to Halloween 1, showing, the cops looking for Michael Myers after Loomis shot him. I love this concept. I love it. I love the way they shot it. I love the entire thing. This movie is a flat out masterpiece. I have to give it. I want to give it a 10, but what would I put Halloween 2, the original, at? Oh God, I might think that Halloween Kills is actually even better. The problem is Halloween 2 is just such a wonderful movie when it comes to atmosphere that it's like so thick with that empty hospital and all of those little shots where like Michael fades into view from the darkness and then he stabs the chick in the head with the needle, and just moments like that this movie didn't get. And if it did, it would be the best horror movie of all time to me, but it didn't. And one thing I love about this movie is something that has happened with horror lately is jump scares are like a big thing. This movie might have had like 2, and for some reason it made the kills feel a little sterile. Just a little bit. And I don't know why. It wasn't that, I want a jump scare every time, a killer does something, but I don't know. It just still has that little bit of sterility that the Halloween 2018 did with a lot of the kills, where it was a little too, just straightforward. He, goes up and stabs or whatever he does. I'm not going to spoil the kills because there's a lot of them. But I feel like a lot of the kills were almost like action movie kills where there's not as much impact or creep factor as you'd expect from this series. That is the only knock I have against it, is that it's slightly too fast in some spots. That's what I mean. It's slightly too fast. Not by much. This movie's a 9 out of 10. And the only reason it's not a 10 is because Halloween 2, the original, is a 10 to me. And that might change because this is my initial thoughts when it comes to Halloween Kills. And when we get to Halloween Night, where I publish the episode where I've watched all of them in context, then I can give you a more broad view, because we're really running on what I remember from the Halloween series, because I haven't watched them all in years, so we'll see what happens. But I definitely would put this in the upper tier. This is what H2O should have been, because here's the thing. We know that H2O is just overrated crap. I think everyone knows that. There's like one scene in all of H2O that's really good, and that's the one where, Laurie and Michael look at each other through the window. H2O was just Scream with Halloween. It wasn't even a good Scream knockoff. But the only reason that Halloween H2O exists is because Scream. That's it. I mean, that's really the only reason. And I have to watch them all again, and that's going to be kind of a pain. I might have to just watch some summaries or something from like Decker Shadow or somebody else, because I really don't have the time to sit down and watch that many movies in a row. I think it would cloud my judgment quite a bit if I did, mainly because it's just, you watch a lot of movies, you eventually kind of get sick of the topic, you know what I mean? But as it stands right now, when it comes to Halloween, the Michael Myers movies, because we're not talking about Halloween 3, which I think is its own movie, and it does have some callbacks to that too. It has a lot of callbacks to the older movies, which I'm not going to spoil, but it does, and those are really great fan service. Like, you know, it really doesn't put it in your face like, hey, remember this? It's sort of like they show a lot of respect to the older films. So right now, I've always sort of ranked the Halloween series as number 2 is the best, and then you can rank the rest of them in order. You know, number 1 is just as good as number 2, even though I'm just going to say Halloween 1 and 2 is one movie. We're just going to call it Halloween 12 or something. I don't know, but that is one movie. Halloween 1 and 2 was. Just like I feel like Halloween 2018 and this is one movie, but we haven't seen the third part, so can't say that. But I love that sort of continuation, the direct continuation of the same night, same characters and everything. So let's get on to my final ranking of the Halloween series. And now it's time to wrap up this Halloween review-a-thon for the year 2021. This was quite a journey for me, and honestly, I enjoyed it for the most part. It was tough watching this many movies in a row and reviewing all of them and trying to get all my thoughts together. But so far, I don't really think my rankings have moved around much at all. But to me, I will still say that Halloween 2 is my favorite, the original Halloween 2. Halloween Kills is still number 2. Halloween 1 is number 3. Halloween 4 will be number 4. I'm not going to count 3 at all because it wasn't a Michael Myers movie and it made no sense, but it was okay. I recommend watching it if you need something really weird to watch on Halloween. It's not a terrible movie. It just doesn't make much sense. But after 4, I would say Resurrection, 5, 6, 2018, H2O, the 2 Rob Zombie movies. I think that's all of them. There really has been a lot of changes when I think about it. I used to think Halloween 6 was just kind of weird, but I kind of liked it just because of how over the top it was. But after watching it again, it's kind of is a jumbled mess where it almost feels like after Halloween 3, they tried to take that sort of story that Halloween 3 did and make Michael Myers part of it. And 6 was like the biggest amalgamation of all of that, where I felt like 6 was more like a sequel to 3 because of Dr. Wen and all of that stuff, but it didn't work in that movie either. But anyway, my final thoughts, I think Halloween is still a good series, but out of all the movies, the only ones I'd really ever return to is 1, 2, Kills, and 4. I really don't see a point watching 5, 6, H2O, Resurrection, the Rob Zombie movies ever again. Even if Resurrection is just kind of a fun cornball time, it's, you know, just, it's corny, it's cheesy, it's stupid, but it's enjoyable. So maybe add Resurrection on the list of movies that I would watch again. But this series just had such a nosedive after the second one, because I thought the first one was kind of mediocre until you get to the last 30 minutes, which is probably the best horror cinema you could ever watch. But after that, Halloween 2 perfected it, and then Halloween Kills perfected it as well. But beyond those, everything else is pretty much a skip. Unless you really want to see the Jamie Lloyd stuff and the Thorn trilogy, which I can understand why you might want to watch 4, 5, 6, because they're still watchable, even though I think 6 is just a mess and I really did not enjoy that one. I would still watch it again just to complete that Thorn trilogy. I hate the story, but they at least still felt like they were trying at that point with 4, 5, 6. H2O might be the worst. If it wasn't for Rob Zombie, H2O would be the worst. It was the first one I watched, and I just... Scream and Halloween don't mix. Like, the writing that would work with Scream does not work with the writing in Halloween H2O. It's easily the most dated of all the movies, for sure, because it's just so 90s that it's just kind of cringe. But that's my overall ranking. Hope you enjoy listening to this. Thank you so much for listening, as always. Season 3 starts next week, and we will be changing formats just a tiny bit, not by much. Gonna try to make this show a little scarier, basically, and maybe a little less preachy, but we'll see what happens. Not gonna do a major overhaul or anything, but I have kind of got my love for horror and the movies and all of that back, so I kind of want to take the first segment of the show and highlight other movies, you know, maybe opening with a review or a recommendation for a horror movie like Cube or something, where I would talk about a movie that I really enjoy and why I think you should watch it as the opening segment before we get into, the usual audiobook chapter and then the final review of Are You Afraid of the Dark. So I think that would be a really good way to do this show from now on, is to keep the opening segment based around a horror movie of the week. So I think that would be a good way to keep it fresh, because you'd always have something to come back to every week in all 3 segments. I still enjoy helping people, and if you need my advice or disappointed with the first segment being cut because it just kind of didn't fit the horror motif, I'm sorry. We can eventually go back to it if you want to, but I feel like this would be a better decision to make this show like 100% horror instead of 70%. If you need any advice or you want to talk to me about anything or whatever, you can always send me an email, jack@terrortrax.com, and I will talk to you one-on-one. Or you can join the Discord and, send me a private message, and we can talk about whatever issue you have with your writing. But I just feel like if I keep going in that direction, that I will end up basically being like a Coach Red Pill of horror, where it's just so out of place that I'm trying to add like spiritual stuff to it, and it will just be a bunch of stuff that has nothing to do with horror or writing. So I thank you for listening so far. I really do. Season 3 starts next week, and I will see you then. Thanks for listening, as always. Oh, and make sure that you go to terrortrax.com/follow to follow me on all my social media. I'm actually moving most of my stuff to minds.com because they're a lot more friendly, and I really want that site to grow. It's minds.com/JackPierceBooks. You can find a link to it on the terrortrax.com/follow. Please follow me over there. We got a great community going. Everybody's really nice. Everybody's really cool. There's not a lot of politics or anything over there. And yeah, so I'll see you over there. Take care, everyone. Hope you enjoyed this. Good night.
Thanks for listening. If you'd like to follow us, go to terrortrax.com/follow. Also, please check out our Patreon, where you can get cool merch, writing lessons, and other awesome rewards starting at $5 a month at patreon.com/terrortrax. See you next week. Goodbye for now.